people don't just hire the professional person, they hire the entirety, right? So we hire the person for their values. And if their values are volunteering at an animal shelter, or volunteering at anything giving back in their life, anything with sales, please put that on there, because it talks about the soft skill sets that aren't necessarily clinical competencies, but just human competencies of being a good person. And people hire people that they like. So please, you can put that on, hobbies, you can put it towards the bottom of your resume, but it absolutely can make a difference in your interview process if you put that on there.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
All right, on this episode of First Case during our entire season on communication, we are going to be speaking with Krista Whiting, VP of Healthcare Recruitment at Parkwood International. And the conversation today, Melanie, is about communicating your personal self. And you're going to learn what that means in this episode, but in the interview process. And how do you make sure that people get the right idea about you?
I cannot wait to have this conversation with Krista. As I was putting this season together and trying to look at communication from a bunch of different angles than maybe the kinds that we just sit and get in our, yearly competencies and go to sleep through, I actually ran across a post from Krista on LinkedIn, and I followed her on LinkedIn for a while, but the post that she had written was about interviewing or something to that effect. I'm like, oh, we need to talk about this. This is communication. Who are we as nurses? Who are we as professionals? And how do we get that message across in an interview or on our resume? And Krista was just the right person to interview. So I cannot wait for her to share her insight and wisdom and experience in this interview today.
All right, Krista and her personalized self up next on First Case.
I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A 17 Studios production, you're listening to First Case.
Krista Whiting, VP of Healthcare Recruitment at Parkwood International, joining us now to talk about really advocating for oneself during a very stressful time, and that's the interview process. And so, Melanie, you and I have asked Krista to come on, and it's this whole season around communication, but a lot of times we don't communicate who we are, our needs. We don't advocate for ourselves, and especially when we really want something, we'll kind of like take it down a notch and maybe not advocate for ourselves as well as we might for our patients. And so, Krista, we're really excited to have you on this season of First Case. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
So, Krista, why don't you start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself? And I would say, feel free to talk about things that you like to do in your free time or personal interest, not just your professional background.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Vice President of Healthcare Recruitment at Parkwood International. We are a third-party executive search firm, and I specialize exclusively in clinical nurse leadership in the Southern market. So hospitals come to me, ask me to find folks for them, and then I go and headhunt people from other hospitals and plop them in their hospital. So all I do all day is try to advocate for people to advocate for themselves. So I also have a degree in communication. So it is so crucial that we advocate for ourselves in the interview process. And hopefully that's what we can help with today. And when I'm not working, I have plenty of dogs. I like to read, and I also help edit educational videos on my friend's YouTube channel. So everybody can be
Very
learning.
cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I really love that. I recruit, from one hospital to help another hospital. You might even place somebody back in that original hospital. It kind of gives a new term to frenemy, because honestly, I mean, that there's been a lot of shifting, especially over the last few years. And I know hospitals had been paying quite a bit in staffing nurses and temp nurses. And I think ultimately everybody would like to have, somebody that's tenured, that's going to be a direct hire and really stabilize that nursing force. And I will say this, one great thing about being a nurse is having flexibility. And so I think a lot of us, I've been very flexible with my nursing career, obviously, hosting this podcast. Melanie has, and getting into social media. But I think people like having that flexibility and sometimes just a change of scenery. And the only thing is it's a lot to change jobs. It's a lot to go through the hiring process again. And sometimes we change for lots of different reasons. And, I kind of wonder sometimes if somebody is like really looking for a change of scenery, sometimes they're just taking whatever it is that they can get. And you're going to have a whole lot of insight on that today and all the different aspects of looking for a new job and recruitment. Can you start off by just kind of talking about the psychology of the folks that you work with, the nurses that are coming to you and saying, I'm looking for a new opportunity. And then also on the healthcare side that are coming to you and saying, we've got a lot of open positions and we really need your help. What's kind of going on for them when they reach out to you?
Certainly. So when a candidate reaches out to me, we've discovered there are 6 main reasons why candidates are considering a change from their current job. People are either looking for a new challenge, they want a new location, they want advancement, they want more money, they want to work with different people, or they want to be with a more stable organization. And 9 times out of 10, people want to work for different people because that's who we work with, right? It's people don't work for companies, they work for people. So that's what candidates are primarily looking for. And in terms of hospitals recruiting, quite frankly, they come to me when they want somebody who's already trained up. So they want me to find someone boots on the ground, ready to roll, and that costs. But quite frankly, I think retainment is the new recruitment, because if everybody focused more on their retainment budget instead of their recruiting budget, I wouldn't have a job. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So I'm still going to be here for a while.
It's funny that you talk about people. It's about people, and it's about people working for people. And then the retention and retaining and how important that is, because I actually read a quote today. Actually, I think it was more set up as a meme, but in general, the idea was the CFO was talking to the CEO, and the CFO was like, what if we put all this money into training all these employees and then they leave? What are we going to do? And the CEO said, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? And you're like, oh, different shift in perspective there. But it's so important to invest in our people and work on retaining them. And that really stuck with me. And I thought it was very important, and how important it is that we actually pay attention to retaining and retention. But still, people are still looking around. People still are willing to change jobs. But sometimes they're just kind of open to it and it just lands in their lap, and maybe they weren't thinking about it. And then they heard about something good, so then they switched, right? So I think when we talked before, you gave me some stats on the different types of job hunters. Can you break that down on what's going on with people and why they're looking?
Absolutely. So we say that there are about 58% of candidates are open to hearing about a new job if it was the right time, place, and fit for them. And then there's 29% of people who are actively considering a change, looking for other jobs. And then there's that lucky 13% that love where they work and don't plan on leaving. So if we look at that workforce, it's a huge chunk of people who would consider a change if the right opportunity were to come in their lap. It's always about timing in our lives, especially with recruitment.
So how do you play into that as a recruiter? These different people in different areas of their lives looking for jobs. What is it exactly that you are doing when it comes to either finding someone to fill a position or recruiting people themselves to come to jobs?
So my role as an agency recruiter, I proactively reach out to everybody, regardless of geography, regardless of timing. And I just ask them if they'd be open to listening. Not, hey, I want to steal you. You're going to start working there on Monday. It's really about, are you just curious about what else is out there? Because you never know what someone else's motivators for change are. So then when I start to talk to them, maybe pique their interest, I really care the most about what are they looking for in a future employer. Is it that new group of people they'd be working for in terms of a boss? Is it a culture? Do they need more money? Do they want to be closer to family members across the country? So I dig down into their motivators and see what's going to proactively get them to make a change. And I love my job because I could be introducing a new opportunity to someone who may not have thought they weren't looking, but then all of a sudden they are and they're about to change their lives.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I guess maybe this is eye-opening to me when it comes to what recruiters do, because I've always really felt like anytime I've been contacted by a recruiter, I really felt like I was talking to a salesperson, and it felt very salesy sometimes to me. And what you're describing seems very relational and very motivated to make sure that you are finding the right position for the right person and not just trying to I don't know, fill a quota or get people in jobs and get people where they need to go. And I like that you mentioned just what is it that's going to be the best for the person you're talking to. I don't know. Do I have the right perspective, or is that how it sometimes does feel with other recruiters maybe?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. The recruiting profession has a pretty, let's face it, negative connotation.
Yeah.
But I hope, knock on wood, I'm not like the rest of recruiters out there, because I try to live and work in my values of generosity and compassion. Generosity for how stressful this is, showing compassion for, hey, I'm a stranger asking you to change your whole life based on what I'm telling you. Like, that takes a lot of weight, right? And so people are not quotas. People are not placement fees.
Right.
These are humans that are going through one of the 3 most stressful things you can go through in your life. So that takes a lot of emotional weight for me. So I care a great deal. I can't go to bed at night thinking, oh, I sent somebody to a dumpster fire hospital, So I want to do this with integrity. Now, do all recruiters think that way? No. So I can't speak for them, but I can speak for what I like to do.
Well, I can definitely speak to your LinkedIn presence and the message that I've picked up on you from LinkedIn as I followed you on LinkedIn. And I've totally picked up on that just from what you post and the persona that you have on LinkedIn. So it definitely comes through in your postings for sure. And just the compassion that you have for the people you're working with. And I would encourage anybody, follow Krista on LinkedIn. She's got a great presence on there. But I want to switch the conversation now over to resumes. Obviously, you're a recruiter. You see resumes all the time. You got to have some tips for us. So share what you know with us about like some tips on resumes.
Yeah, sure. So quite frankly, we all need to get back to the basics. In terms of nursing specifically, I can't tell you how many resumes I get where people don't even tell me how many beds their hospital has. Please, let's get specific on that. If it's a magnet center, if you guys have a trauma designation, how many beds are in your unit? And how many patients do you see in a month? Numbers matter because that quantifies to the size of the hospital, the size of your caseload, and the size of how many people reporting to you. So resume tips, know your numbers. Now, in terms of what should be included and what shouldn't be included, please don't include vague adjectives or cliches like, I'm a detail-oriented team player. Boring. Everybody's that. So let's talk about what's specific to you. What's an accomplishment that has a direct business impact on the hospital that you've been a part of? Because that's special to you and no one else can claim that. So our resume is precious real estate for things specific to what you've had a hand in. Avoid vague cliches, focus on numbers, and you have to talk about yourself. You nurses, you guys are very humble and very giving. y'all got to help me help you, and boast about yourself on your resume. That's what it's there for.
That's funny. You just quoted Jerry Maguire, which I think is a great movie. And it really does talk about, working with somebody else to advocate for you. But truthfully, you've got to put that information, like you said, on the resume. And I'll tell an interesting story. When I worked as a nurse towards the end of my career, I was looking to move towards medical sales, and I had done a number of interviews, but really had trouble getting anybody to talk to me. When I finally did get a job, one of the things that I did was I listed my podcasting experience as a pastime and how I started this up and networked my way to get credentialed access to a professional franchise's locker room. And that made all the difference in the world because they thought I was used to shift work, and sales is very much off hours and all these different things. And so would you even encourage folks to put things and communicate things on their resume that aren't necessarily professional, that might be pastimes, but maybe they're, volunteering their time for, a certain cause, or maybe they have, maybe they do have an entrepreneurial spirit or an interest in a certain area. Do you encourage that on a resume? What advice do you give there?
I absolutely encourage it, because people don't just hire the professional person, they hire the entirety, right? So we hire the person for their values. And if their values are volunteering at an animal shelter, or volunteering at anything giving back in their life, anything with sales, please put that on there, because it talks about the soft skill sets that aren't necessarily clinical competencies, but just human competencies of being a good person. And people hire people that they like. So please, you can put that on hobbies, you can put it towards the bottom of your resume, but it absolutely can make a difference in your interview process if you put that on there.
What's a no-no?
Yeah. What do we not do?
In terms of the resume?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. This is going to be a long podcast. Just kidding. So please don't make it longer than 4 pages. People aren't going to read a novel. You also don't have to really go back past 20 years and give me 15 bullet points. Again, nobody cares what I did when I was the snack bar girl at the skating rink 20 years ago. That's probably not going to make a difference as me as a vice president. So keep it concise, keep it to your metrics. If it's longer than 4 pages, people won't read it, I promise.
So this idea that your resume should only be 1 page is really out the window, right? I mean, you can have multiple pages, just don't turn in a book, is what you're saying, for sure, right?
Well, if it's too short, people won't even know what you do or the oversight that you have. So you have to give them more details. And the people that say only 1 page, that's all we have time for. We're not tweeting something out. Guys, we have more than 180 characters for our resume. So give me those details. Otherwise, I don't know what you do.
Right.
Even Twitter had to increase their character limit to survive. So
Right?
I'll emphasize that too. And, another thing I want to ask about what should go on a resume is also people like looking to move up. I mean, right now, there are a lot of leadership positions that are opening. You even look at just C-level executives, CEOs are leaving healthcare at a crazy rate. And, a lot of them are leaving on their own accord, but there's also turnover because of the financial pressure. But we also know that the nurses are hitting retirement age, a good bulk of them that came in the 70s. And that's leaving open a lot of opportunities for people to move in leadership. I know there's young people out there who are very early in their nursing careers who think, I don't have the experience yet to move into a leadership job. And I'd be really nervous to do that at another hospital. I would be so much more comforted if I moved into leadership where I am today. But they're going to see these jobs and these openings in leadership positions that could help them make more money, could give them an opportunity for career advancement, not just as it relates to the resume, but kind of also talking about the resume. What should somebody who's looking to move into that leadership position for the first time, if they were to change organizations to do it, what should they be keeping in mind, setting themselves up for success? And how can they show leadership capabilities without having leadership experience on the resume?
So a finely tuned resume is your ticket to admittance in terms of the interview process, right? That's only a fraction. But if you are listing, again, those quantifiable metrics that showcase what you've done in terms of a project, have you helped increase patient satisfaction scores? Have you helped in terms of a team-led project where you had a large hand in it? All of that showcases your leadership abilities and your ability to play well in the sandbox with others. So anything where you can advocate for other people in your team is going to show that potential for a leadership opportunity. Now, it's the interview process and how you answer your questions that can equate to a possible leadership position within another organization. Because again, ultimately, people hire people that they like, regardless of the background, whether you have 5 years or 15 years of experience. If you have that great potential as a nurse to be a nurse leader, they will see that in you in the interview process. So I highly encourage candidates to even put in their application for roles they're only 60% qualified at, because they most likely will have a conversation if that hiring authority sees something on their resume that says, you know what, with a little bit of skills training, we can get them where they need to be.
That's really cool. I would not have thought that. My natural tendency would be like, well, if I'm not completely qualified, if I'm not completely eligible for this job, I'm not going to apply for it because they'll look over me. And the thought that, oh, I don't have to be fully qualified, but I just need to represent myself well and tell the story about myself well, then I could be considered. That is eye-opening to me. And that also leads us to the next topic, walks us right into how do we tell that story about ourselves? How do we advocate for ourselves in an interview? What do we do? What's the right thing to do in an interview? Best practices and such.
Yeah, sure. So companies are looking for the following traits. They're looking for people with high energy, a passion for what you do, and knowledge of who they are. But most importantly, folks that are running to them and not away from something else. Like, you can tell when somebody's so desperate that it's kind of cringy, so you don't want to be that candidate, right? Also, research the hospital that you're going to interview with. You know, how many beds, the trauma designation. You got to make it about them. You know, it's like if you were asked to go on a date. And I were to say, well, Justin, I'm looking to date a guy that has pretty eyes or who dresses nice. Wouldn't it be weird if I'm not complimenting Justin himself? How awkward is that? So candidates say, well, I'm looking for an opportunity with an employer that will blah, blah, blah. No, make it about them. I'm interested in your hospital because of your impact in the community. I've looked up your magnet designated. That's so impressive to me. So make it personable about the hospital and make your reason personable to them. I could go on and on about interview tips, but
what if you're not sure? What if you're not sure, right? So I think that's where a lot of people struggle a little bit, is they go into the interview and it's exploratory for them. But to your point, it's really important that the person you're interviewing with, if you want to give yourself a shot to even consider the offer or the opportunity, you know, if it's coming your way, you really do want to present it like, this is why I'm interested in you. This is what I learned. But sometimes that people may have 3, 4 different interviews they're exploring and they're not really sure, you know, that that's the job they're going to take, but they almost need to present it a little bit like they would take it if it was offered to them. You know, to your point about, you know, being genuine and authentic and being yourself when you're communicating that, you know, what is some advice that you can give somebody who's sitting down in that interview and they're not really sure that this is where they want to work and it's part of the reason they're in the interview, and at the same time they don't want to remove themselves, you know, from the conversation?
There's a few things that you can prepare for that are going to be prevalent to every interview, regardless if you want the job or not. Like, one, you need to know that tell me about yourself answer. Oh boy, everybody freaks out about that question, right? It's an opportunity for a 120-second commercial about yourself. It's not an hour-long infomercial. So if you were to practice that, that's going to help you a lot. Secondly, know some behavior-based questions you're probably going to be asked. Give me an example of a time when. So make sure you're picking a solid example that's had an impact on the business, because a weak example is going to be a deal killer. I recommend people use the STAR method. That's a structured manner of responding to a behavior-based interview question by discussing the situation, the task, the action, and result of that. And last but not least, ask good questions, because nothing is worse than a candidate that doesn't have questions to ask, as it just says, well, I didn't care enough about this role to take the time to do the research, so I would know what to ask. So if you can come prepared with that, regardless if you're going to take an offer from them or not, you're going to present yourself as a professional that is prepared for the interview that you have.
Okay, so what if, and this has happened to me more than once, because I know I need to go into an interview and I need to be able to ask questions, but in the course of the conversation, they've answered every single question that I've come pre-prepared with. What do you do in that instance? What do you ask about? What do you say?
Oh, some great questions. You can ask a question that builds rapport with the interviewer. So you can say, well, tell me the reason why you like working here, because that's going to give you valuable insight as to what they value as a person, but why they love their job. But also, you're looking for that insight too, right? What are some of the 3 most important traits or experiences for this person to have in order to be exceptional? Why is the role vacant? Those are some good questions. But again, I've said this 5 times, people tend to hire people they like. So if you ask them questions about them, people love talking about themselves and their organization, and that will give you a chance to do so.
That's a really good suggestion. I'm taking notes, by the way, as you're talking.
Please.
So I have several sticky notes because that's all I had available. Sticky notes full of thoughts here. So one of the other things, though, in the day and age that we find ourselves in, you don't always do a face-to-face interview. There's a phone interview. There might be a face-to-face interview. Can you talk about the differences maybe in coming to a phone interview versus an in-person interview, or things maybe to keep in mind, but depending on what kind of interview you're doing?
I mean, phone interviews, you kind of can cheat a little bit because you can have your metrics written down on a little piece of paper to
Right.
remind yourself, oh, what are my patient satisfaction scores? I have it right here. But in terms of a face-to-face interview, it's the same things that I've said previously, but you've got to dress to impress. But it's not just what you say, but it's how you act, because nonverbal communication is 70% of how we speak to others. So it's crucial that you show those nonverbal skills, head nods, active listening, smiling. And you know what? Being mentally present can be exhausting. So I tell candidates, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint in a face-to-face interview process. So smile and wave, boys. You got this if you can stand it.
I love that. I say that all the time. Smile and wave, boys. Just smile and wave. But
That's right.
Okay, so connected to all of this with interviewing and with the job search, you have to talk about social media, because it is where we find ourselves in this time. And does that affect a job search? Does my social media presence affect me positive or negatively? Does it matter? Can you talk about social media?
It absolutely matters. And it can make or break whether you can get a job, because your social media is still a representation of your character. Like I said, people can't just hire the professional side of you. They hire the entire person. So the content that you engage with and you post about online is a reflection of your values, whether that's fair or not. For example, about 5 years ago, I had an ER director interviewing with the 10th busiest hospital in the entire country in terms of their ER patient visits. And the internal recruiter did some social media research on that guy 10 minutes before the call. And wouldn't you know it, on one of his social medias, he liked a group called Hot Naked Selfies.
Oh, no.
Oh,
no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so this is a faith-based nonprofit healthcare system that does not smile upon that kind of behavior.
No.
And so regardless of his competencies, he was not a social fit for what they're looking for. He didn't get a second interview.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I teach on social media. I give presentations regularly to nursing students about using social media as healthcare professionals. And these are the kinds of things that I remind them when I talk about using social media all of it, what you're doing on there can come back on how you're perceived as a professional. And you have to think about that when you are applying for jobs or when you're working for a company. But wow, that story really hits home with how it can really affect you.
It can. And recruiters absolutely look you up before they talk to you. We can see the activity on your LinkedIn. We can see what you post on. We can see what you comment on. And I absolutely have not pursued a candidate because of dialogue on social media. So you don't even get the ticket to admission. You're just not invited at all. And companies do the same thing.
Goodness, it's good to remember.
Yep. Whether that's fair or not, it's to their discretion. So social media is a permanent part of our lives. So we have to be cognizant of what we're putting out there for people to think who they think about us.
Mm-hmm. But you choose what you show the world. So if you show that you're a thought leader, if you show that you have great networking skills, I mean, think about if you're going to be in a leadership position, and we are talking about all these different vacancies, and you're somebody that talks about positive work culture and how to work together and, just all of those types of constructive activities. And you clearly have a broad network to pull from, and you're constantly showing that you're learning and engaging in learning activities. That also could put you in a strong position, correct?
Absolutely. That's the only reason I'm probably talking to you guys is because you see me from social media. Right. I'm not the best recruiter in my company. Heck, I'm not even the best recruiter in Texas for healthcare. But because I put myself out there, I want to be seen as the candidate advocate and the client ambassador. And it takes some vulnerability to put yourself out there, but I believe that I want people to see me for my genuine self. And if you put your best foot forward, if you put forth the most professional version of your personalized self, people will see that and that will resonate with the world.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important to not only do that for your own benefit, but for the benefit of others. If we can lead with, positive communications on social media, that's one of the reasons why I love LinkedIn. I feel like most of the conversations on LinkedIn are very positive and constructive, especially, towards career growth and education. If we're all contributing to that, then to your point, others will get involved and they'll feel more comfortable in that space to be their personalized selves. And I like that. I never heard anybody sort of talk about the way that they communicate about themselves through social media as being their personalized self, because nobody wants to find somebody or read content on social media that it looks like they copy and pasted from somebody else, or that it doesn't seem authentic to who they are as an individual. Those posts don't perform well. They don't always necessarily contribute much, but we are all uniquely different. And Krista, I think that was really, really good advice, but I like that term, our personalized self.
Well, thank you. We struggle as a society to fight with, we want to stand out, but we also want to fit in with everyone else. And so you have to find this unique middle ground where you can live your most authentic life in your values without fading into the background. That's what you can do in your professional life. That's what you need to do on social media, because if you post what everybody else posts, they'll forget. But also if you interview like what you think they want to hear from you, they'll forget you too. So it's really important that we bring that to all aspects of our life, whether we're interviewing or we're just living our lives.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of bravery to do that too, especially when you haven't interviewed in a while. I have one last question before I want to get your final thoughts on kind of communicating throughout the interview process. But, I asked one question from you're a young professional and you're trying to climb the ladder and you've had no experience in leadership. I want to ask this a different way. Let's say you're somebody who's later on in your career and has been a loyal to your organization, 15 years, maybe 20 years that you've worked at the same place. And it's just clearly time for a change, but you haven't interviewed in forever. So you're not even practiced at being that personalized self, right? You've just been doing your job and maybe you've been your personalized self in the work environment, but to communicate that to people that you don't know, think about it. The people that are in that position are typically in very comfortable environments where they know everybody and have known everybody for quite a while. How do they all of a sudden prepare themselves for being in front of this group of people that they don't know and not fall into that trap of trying to tell them what they think they want to hear instead of telling them, about their personalized self?
Well, a few thoughts on this, Justin. I really think that one, candidates need to know their worth, and they have been valued at their organization for a long time for a reason. And so they have to reinvest in what can I contribute to another organization. And again, everyone has different motivators for change. So being honest in the interview process with the potential hiring authority as to why they want to go to a future organization, I think is important. I can't tell you how many times hiring authorities have told me, they told me the reason they're leaving and it just didn't really jive with me. And those candidates said what they thought the hiring authority wanted to hear, not what their real reasons were. So again, be the most professional version of your personalized self because people recognize authentic people, and that's who they want on their team. So know your numbers, present yourself in the best way that you can, but also have confidence in what you do because you've been in this field for this long for a reason. Someone else will be lucky to have you too.
All right, Krista, final thoughts. Anything that we didn't talk about or mention that you just feel like has to be said that people need to understand in how they communicate during the interview process?
I think something that's crucial for nurses graduating, tenured, regardless, need to hear is that hiring authorities want to hear your reason for wanting to be in healthcare in the first place. COVID has changed our outlook in healthcare. It's made your jobs incredibly hard and difficult. And so I thank you for what you do. But if you remind them of your passion for why you got into this field in the first place, it will humanize that experience for you. So again, I can't stress enough, be yourself. Even if you have all the skills on the job description, but you're not a culture fit, you're not that team player, they will not hire you. But even if you don't have all the skills, hospitals can teach skills if you are a culture fit. We just can't teach people to change their personality.
Yeah.
Krista, great job. This was a phenomenal interview. And I can't believe how fast it went.
I know.
This is one of those that just really, really went so quickly. So you have great energy. We love seeing your presence on LinkedIn. You nailed it. Being on social media is the best way to get our attention, and you got it. Great job today. Thanks for coming on with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And if anybody wants interview tips, you can email me anytime. You can probably find me on LinkedIn.
All right, Krista. Well, they can find you, Krista Whiting, just by searching on LinkedIn. But what's your email address?
It's Krista@parkwoodintl.com.
That was Krista Whiting, VP of Healthcare Recruitment at Parkwood International, talking about communicating during the interview process. And there were a number of things that I really liked about what Krista had to say in this interview. And she made it so easy, Melanie. But one of the things that stood out was just talking about being prepared for those situation-based type questions that always come up in the interview. And this can be incredibly intimidating, especially for somebody who's never interviewed before, or maybe you're talking about, or it's been a long time since they interviewed. Maybe you're a new graduate nurse, and so you've interviewed, but you haven't interviewed for a nursing job before. And then all of a sudden, it's like the NCLEX all over again, where you've got to have that critical thinking and it's on display. And you've got to be able to, especially if you're somebody who's new, you've got to be able to relate it to something non-healthcare to sort of elaborate on it. But even if you're somebody who's been tenured as a nurse for many, many years, when they sit down and they could be coming at you with any question, any situational question. I think the thing that happens to a lot of people, and it definitely happened to me early in my career, is I would just try to ramble my way through the answer. And I didn't have a real structure for responding to that, especially not until I kind of got into my sales career. You learn a lot of these types of communications and how to structure it. That STAR acronym, wonderful. Like, what was the situation? What was the task that needed to be done? What were the action steps that you took to get it done? And then what ultimately was the result of those actions? If you think about it that way, and really try to spend 30 to 40 seconds on each piece of that, you will communicate it so clearly, and you'll be able to make it easier on yourself when responding and being far less intimidated by those questions that may come up.
Absolutely. And I think it was just really helpful to have that structure and how to answer a question. And just, it's always easy to follow an acronym, right? And to work through it. But then also the reminder that this is relational. People hire people. They don't hire numbers. They don't hire statistics. They hire people. And so taking comfort in that, I'm going to an interview, but I'm going to meet people and I'm going to look, it's relational. And those questions that she suggested to always have in your back pocket when it's time to ask questions, get to know them, make it about them. That was incredibly helpful and really good information to tuck away for the next interview anybody might be on. But just such great insight today. This was an incredibly helpful interview.
And we're obviously big proponents of social media,
right?
But I think being responsible on social media, you can really communicate some positive attributes, and that whole personalized self and being genuine in the way that you put yourself out there. Honestly, if you're listening to this and you're not somebody who's a content creator, and statistically less than 1% of you are, but you're somebody who does learn a lot from being involved in social media, maybe you're commenting on our posts, this is a great way to broadcast that you are a continuous learner and that you're self-directed. It shows initiative. So there are ways to utilize commenting and engaging in social media in an appropriate and professional way that can position you as a standout amongst the crowd. And you can let some of that do the talking, because as a business owner myself, I guarantee you that Krista is correct that people look at your social media presence before they do an interview with you. It tells them so very much. And even not being on social media communicates that you're a private person and that you respect other people's privacy. So, it's all part of that. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. As I mentioned, we'd love for you to engage with us on social media. So look up First Case on LinkedIn and Facebook. You'll find Krista herself on LinkedIn. You can connect with her as well. We love it if you subscribe to our podcast. And the best way to listen is by downloading our smartphone app. But maybe you're already listening to podcasts on your favorite podcast application. Just search for First Case Media there. And we love feedback. So give us a rating and a review if you do download the app. Like, subscribe, engage. We want all of it. But if you are one of those private people and you don't want to comment on a post, or you have feedback for the show, you can certainly email us at info@firstcasemedia.com and on behalf of Melanie and myself, thanks for listening to this episode of First Case.